Does that blow your mind? The thought that you may be enough, just as you are, right here, right now. If it does, you're not alone. And there's a reason for that. So let's unpack that now. Our sense of self-worth doesn't just appear out of nowhere. It is constructed piece by piece through our experiences and interpretations we derive from those experiences. The foundation is set early as a child, where we lack the ability to judge whether these messages we receive about ourselves are even true or even fair. We just absorb them. We take them as truth. We move forward with that. And it's usually based on what our caregiver showed us. So if your caregiver constantly showed you that you were worthy of love, attention, and care, you likely have a secure foundation, which I would like to let you know is the cornerstone of a healthy self-esteem. Yet, as you know, life gets messy and so does the caregiving aspect of it. So it can be very, very complicated. As you know, parents are human. I'm not here making excuses for them, but they are. We come with flaws. So that being said, it could be the caregivers have been wrestling with their own traumas, their own unmet needs. It could be generational, right? And they could have loved you more deeply, but they just didn't know how. They couldn't express it in the ways that you could understand, especially as a child. So what does that leave? What was left there was neglect, criticism, abuse, or conditional approval based on your achievements and your behaviors only. Nothing else was kind of brought into the equation because they weren't shown that either. But whatever those early experiences were, guess what they did? They created a blueprint on how you relate to yourself now. And then you know what happened next? And then came the rest of the world, right? I'm talking about teachers, peers, romantic partners, social media, society at large. And with its beauty standards and its definitions of success, it messages what it takes and what makes someone valuable. That could be totally based on something that was not what your experience was. And guess what? All of this gets internalized. It gets internalized with all the neglect and things that you've experienced growing up. All of this gets internalized. All of it, with all the other stuff that we went through. But understanding the architect, understanding the architect of your self-esteem isn't about blame. Guess what it's about? It's about clarity. I always thought of it this way. You can't renovate a structure if you don't know how it was built. So don't even try it. Don't. But that's why we're here. Here comes the truth. What I've learned is that most of us are still navigating life based on beliefs we formed decades ago. That is based on limited understanding as a child. Most of us is probably still chasing love and approval that we always wanted and we should have got from the start. In addition, we still hold on to the lies that we were told about ourselves, and it just does more destruction. I remember working with this brilliant woman, okay? Let's call her Monica. Monica was a physician. She was respected in her field, got all the accolades, had a loving family, was down for him, was there. Hey, I'm here, no matter what. But on the inside, guess what she told me? She always felt like an imposter. She was constantly anxious that she would be found out as inadequate. This is what happened when we worked together. We explored the architect of her self-esteem. We discovered that because her father, who was deeply invested in her academic success, his love and approval, at least as she experienced it, was contingent on her achievements. So as a child, she absorbed the harsh belief that I'm only as good as what I achieve. My value is tied to my performance. That belief had been operating in the back of her mind for decades, unseen but incredibly powerful, pushing her to succeed while also causing her relentless anxiety. She told me, my value is tied to my performance. You know what? That belief had been operating in the back of her mind for decades, unseen. Once she saw it clearly, she could begin to question it and test it against her own adult reality. And you know what that did? It deliberately built something different. So I want to change it up for a bit. Remember that voice I talked about earlier, the harsh inner critic? Okay. Well, it's not actually out to get you. Now, I know that might sound crazy. You'd be like, well, it's a critic. How is it not out to get me? But I need you to hear me out. The critical inner voice is developed as an adaptation. Yeah, you adapted. A way to keep yourself safe in the environment you grew up. Maybe being perfect was the way you secured love or avoided conflict. Maybe setting impossible high standards kept you striving for the validation you craved. Or focusing on your flaws was a way to beat others to the punch. Hurt yourself before they can hurt you. Whatever its origin, your inner critic genuinely believes it's protecting you. Yep. It's like an overprotective parent who never realized you grew up. And the strategies that once helped you survive childhood, maybe they're now doing more harm than good. Listen, this realization was a game changer for me. I spent years believing that I was broken for having such a vicious inner voice. I spent years trying to silence it with positive affirmations, focusing on self-love, but nothing worked, not in the long run. What finally shifted things was approaching that voice with curiosity instead of fighting it. Asking it, what are you afraid of? Or asking it, what are you afraid of that will happen to you? What are you afraid of that would happen to me if you aren't constantly criticizing me? What are you trying to protect me from? The answers were illuminating. What I found out is that my inner critic was terrified that if it ever let up, I would be complacent. I would stop striving. I would end up worthless and alone. And it genuinely believed it was saving my life by constantly finding my flaws. I hear you're scared, but you're grown now and you don't need fear to keep moving forward. Actually, I strive better with acceptance and compassion. It wasn't about getting rid of my inner critic. It wasn't about changing my relationship with it. It was about understanding that what truly keeps me safe and what helps me thrive. Our inner critic developed within the context of our unique histories, and it adapted to our specific circumstances. By understanding its intentions of its misguided yet genuine attempt to protect us is the first step towards transforming its role in our lives. So how do we actually rebuild our sense of self-worth? How do we move from conditional self-esteem to something more stable and genuine? Well, it starts with awareness. You can't change a pattern you don't see. This means catching those moments when your worth suddenly feels at stake, when you make a mistake, face rejection, feel judged, or just comparing yourself to others. In those moments, I want you to notice the automatic thoughts that arise, like the interpretations we often make to ourselves. I failed, so I must be a failure. They rejected me, so I must be unlovable. They are succeeding, so I must fall behind. None of these are facts, they're interpretations, and they are almost always skewed through the lens of conditional self-worth. The next step is to be curious instead of convinced, to question those interpretations instead of accepting them as true. When your inner critic says, you're such a failure, try to respond with something like this. That's an interesting thought. Where did I learn to equate making a mistake as being fundamentally flawed childhood, right? Is this even actually accurate? Wait a minute, is it even helpful? What would I say to someone I love who was in my position right now? This isn't about arguing with yourself or forcing positivity. It's about creating a bit of space between you and your thoughts. It's about remembering that you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness that notices them. Now, from the space of awareness, can you begin to deliberately practice a new kind of relationship with yourself? Yeah, of course you can. I want you to know This relationship should be based on one that has a radical premise that your worth is inherent, not something that you have to earn. Now, from this space of awareness, you can begin to deliberately practice a new kind of relationship with yourself, one based on the radical premise that your worth is inherent, not something that you have to earn. This may look like self-compassion, treating yourself with the same kindness that you would offer a good friend who was struggling. It may even look like setting boundaries based on understanding what your needs are and that they matter, or making choices aligned with your values rather than your fears. Self-compassion, by the way, is not self-indulgence. It's not about letting yourself off the hook or lowering your standards. In fact, research constantly, people who practice self-compassion are more likely to own up to their mistakes and feel motivated to improve, unlike those who are constantly self-critical. Doesn't that make sense, right, when you think about it? Criticism triggers shame, and shame makes us all want to hide, deny, or blame, whereas compassion creates safety, and safety allows us to be honest about where and what we need to grow. Now, let me be clear. Building genuine self-esteem isn't a one-time achievement. It's a daily practice of choosing to relate to yourself differently. Like with any practice, it gets easier with repetition, but it never becomes automatic, ever. There will still be days when your inner critic is loud, when your worth feels shaky, and when those old patterns reassert themselves. Guess what? That's not failure. It's being human. The difference is now is that you have a choice. You can notice these moments without being defined by them. You can respond with understanding rather than judgment. You can return to the truth of your inherent worth time and time again. This practice takes place in specific moments throughout our daily lives, like when you look in the mirror and those critical thoughts start creeping in, or when you compare your life to someone else's highlighted reel. This can happen when you make a mistake or face any setback. You can often feel rejected, misunderstood, or just not good enough. These are the moments when you get to practice something different, when you get to deliberately choose how you relate to yourself in the face of imperfection and struggle. I have found that 3 questions can be very helpful in these moments. And now I'm going to break them down for you. So the first question is, what am I believing right now about my worth? This question will create an awareness of your conditional thinking. The second question is this actually true or is it an old story? And with that question, it creates perspective. You can put things in order. And the third question is, how would I respond to someone I love who is feeling this way? And you know what this creates? This creates a pathway to self-compassion. Now, these questions don't magically make the difficult feelings disappear. No, they don't. But they do change your relationship with those feelings and help you hold them with more awareness, more kindness, more wisdom. And you know what? Over time, that changes everything. It changes it. I want to be honest with you. We're talking about rewiring neural pathways that have been reinforced for decades. Yeah, decades. We're talking about challenging beliefs that feel like absolute truth. We're talking about developing a fundamental difference relationship with yourself. That's not a weekend project. It's more like a renovation of the most important home you'll ever live in, the home of your own consciousness. But I can tell you from both personal and a professional experience, it's worth it. Because when your worth isn't constantly hanging in the balance, you're free. Free to try and fail. Free to love without fear of abandonment. Free to set boundaries without guilt. Free to grow in your own free to grow at your own pace in your own way. So that voice in your head, it doesn't have to be the enemy. It doesn't have to be the dominant narrative of your life. With patience and practice, it can transform into something more supportive, wiser, and aligns with the truth of who you are. And the truth is, you're never broken. Your worth was never actually in question. The conditions you placed on your values as a person was learned and can be unlearned. When you're not constantly trying to prove your worth or compensate for a sense of inadequacy, you have more energy available for genuine connection, more meaningful contributions, and guess what? Authentic joy. So I'll ask you, what would become possible in your life if you weren't constantly questioning your worth? Who would you be if you knew bone deep that you are enough? So I appreciate you guys spending time with me, Tea with Tiffany. Here's a quick heads up. This video is all about educational coaching, not therapy. I'm sharing some insights from my experience as a licensed therapist. But what we are diving in today is a personal growth framework that anyone can use for self-discovery. Now, if you're dealing with trauma or serious mental health issues, these techniques are best used alongside professional support. Think of this as some powerful self-coaching, but not a substitute for therapy. I appreciate you for tuning in and doing the work. Growth is a journey, and you're on the right path. I appreciate you for tuning in and doing the work. And guess what? Growth is a journey, and you're on the right path. But listen, this isn't just a channel, this is a movement. A space where we face tough truths, dig deep, and grow stronger together. If this spoke to you, please hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the notifications, because trust me, there's so much more to come. And if you need a little extra, check out my free handout links that are waiting for you in the description. So from here, take care, stay aware, and I'll see you next time.